The police officer, Babakir Hussain Osama, had serious issues with Indians and Americans. He hated Indians with passion and abhorred Americans with bitterness. While he was studying at the University of Mumbai, he was accused of being a drug dealer and condemned to 11 years in the rotten jails of India. He could have been sentenced to a full term of 19 years behind bars, but his clean criminal record saved him from getting the maximum punishment. In actual fact, he was innocent of the malicious charge, but during the time of his 3-year trial he had no money to appoint a lawyer to defend his case. The court appointed a Hindu advocate to defend his case. His Hindu lawyer turned out to be his enemy rather than his savior. An Indian citizen, who bore Babakir ill will, fixed him up with that hideous accusation. While he was serving his term inside the rotten jails, Babakir came to know who trumped up the false charges. It was his former boss who hid the drugs in his bag while Babakir was away with his final exams. He learned this after he completed 5 years in prison. The informant was a Gonda, an Indian bandit or gangster, who happened to have a mutual acquaintance at the time when Babakir lived in an apartment at the Vakola colony. Circumstances reunited the two friends in jail. There was nothing Babakir could do to change his plight, so he served out his remaining 6 years in the rotten jails of Mumbai and Pune. Babakir Hussain Osama could not finish his studies and therefore failed to obtain his degree from the prestigious University of Bombay. As soon as he had served his prison term, he was deported and blacklisted at every Indian port of entry. He returned to his country after an absence of 14 years. He came home empty-handed and a miserable failure in life, no different from a soldier returning from a war in a foreign country, defeated. He could not marry the apple of his eye, his Indian girlfriend, Jamila Malik. It was undoubtedly one-sided, but at the last moment, Jamila agreed to marry him, albeit with some conditions. His incarceration shattered that beautiful dream into pieces. While Babakir was stinking and rotting inside the filthy Indian jails, Jamila Malik found a suitor and got married to him. By the time he was a free man, she had borne her Indian husband 6 children, 4 daughters and 2 sons. After Babakir Hussain Osama returned to his hometown in the western region of Sudan, he was treated as an outcast and a jailbird. No one was prepared to believe his story that he was jailed falsely for 11 years. No one among his own relatives and old friends believed his conspiracy story. His story was hard to believe because he used to live and study in India without any financial support. Some of his Sudanese acquaintances turned to be his enemies and spread nasty rumor that Babakir's financial abilities and his desire to marry his Indian girlfriend was fueled by drug cartel overlords from the Mumbai underworld mafia. The rumor was reinforced because 2 other Sudanese men by the names of Abbas and Muhammad from Babakir's town were also involved in drug trafficking between Mumbai and Goa and landed in jail at the same time he was arrested. So, the rumors grew to include Babakir as a partner to Abbas and Muhammad. Shortly after his arrival in Sudan, Babakir Hussain Osama turned 180 degrees and joined an international Muslim terrorist group. He expediently thought the only thing that could shield him from the nasty reputation that he acquired from India was religion. Babakir believed that by becoming a religious man, he would regain the respect of his family members, relatives, and old friends. His affiliation to that notorious Muslim Brotherhood group helped him to get a job in the police. The group instilled immense hatred Westerners and specifically, the Americans. He was made to believe that America and her allies were the cause of all the troubles and problems in the Muslim world. He was also conditioned to believe that America had created the Al-Qaeda and the ISIS terrorist groups in order to get an excuse to invade the Arab countries, leading to permanent control of the Middle East, and thus, its oil. Babakir, like many Muslims, also believe Israel was a partner in creating ISIS. This conspiracy theory made many Muslims to believe that ISIS leader is a Jewish Mossad agent. The Caliph Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the head of the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, according to this belief, is reputed to originate from Edward Snowden, an actor named Elliot Shimon, a Mossad-trained operative. Babakir was already made to believe from childhood that British, France, Russia, and America had created the State of Israel on Arab soil, causing never-ending conflict between the Arabs and the Jews. Babakir's hatred toward the Jews would be impossible to put into words. As a Muslim, he inherited anti-Semitism through the blood of his father and sucked it from the breasts of his mother. It was his father's blood that kept running in his veins and his mother's milk that shaped his flesh and bones. It is suffice to say that, as a Muslim, Babakir considered the Jews as a cursed people, a subhuman, satanic race, descended of apes and pigs, and friends of the devil. Since Babakir's three bitter enemies, Jews, Americans, and Indians, were out of his reach, he spewed his venom on his fellow citizens. Everyone met him or heard about him hated him. His name evoked more fear than that of the devil. If any suspect fell in his hands, he would torture him to death. If the suspect happened to be a female, he would rape her no matter whether she was 6 years old or 60. Before he was sent to his hometown, Babakir trained at the police academy in Khartoum. Every evil that a wicked person could do to his fellow human, Babakir mastered at that notorious police academy. The Muslim Brotherhood government was the first Sudanese regime to introduce the Bu'aut al-Ashba, the ghosts' houses. Anyone entering a ghost house would meet two fates. He would either be tortured to death or emerge a madman. If he managed to survive his interrogation, he would be locked up indefinitely without trial or right of visitation by his family. He would be cast into a deep dark dungeon and he would never ever see the sunlight again. His dungeon would be his toilet and his grave. A Sudanese girl would prefer a life of prostitution or death by starvation on the streets, rather than a stint at the ghost house. If a virgin girl somehow managed to survive the torture and rape inside those stinking slaughter chambers, she would come out with a baby. A daughter of a well-known family entered those concentration camps as a virgin and came out with 2 babies. The leader of that notorious terrorist group, Omar al-Bashir, is now and has been the president of Sudan for 29 years. Given the circumstances, he might as well be the president for life. He was indicted by the International Criminal Court at Hague for crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. An arrest warrant for President Omar al-Bashir was issued on March 4, 2009 by the International Criminal Court indicting him on 5 accounts of crimes against humanity, murder, extermination, forcible transfer, torture, and rape, and 2 accounts of war crimes, pillaging and intentionally directing attacks against civilians. A second arrest warrant for President al-Bashir was later issued on July 12, 2010 by the International Criminal Court adding 3 counts of genocide for the ethnic cleansing of the Fur, Masalit, and Zaghawa tribes of the Darfur region of western Sudan. Until today, December 15, 2018, the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood and president of North Sudan, Omar al-Bashir remains at large, wanted by the International Criminal Court. In spite of all those evils, Babakir Hussein Osama and his Muslim brothers and sisters claim to be the most righteous people on earth and strive hard to implement the dreadful Sharia law in every city and every country of the world. After the Muslim Brotherhood seized power through military coup d'état, Sudan officially became a Muslim and Arab country and with Sharia law enforced on every town and every village within the Islamic Republic of Sudan. At long last, the Sudanese police officer, Babakir Hussein Osama, was able to lay his hands on 2 of his bitterest enemies. An American man and his Indian wife were accused of being undercover spies and arrested by him. It was a common practice in Sudan to accuse the employees and workers of the non-government organizations, NGOs, of being spies or agents for the West. Some voluntary agencies such as CARE and UNCIF were there in Sudan to help the displaced refugees and their children in Darfur province. The Islamic government of the Sudan would customarily accuse them of being secret Christian missionaries that used food and money to brainwash the minds of poor Muslims and convert them to Christianity. Another common charge was spying for the West, America in particular. Without the burden of proof, the accused agency would be kicked out of the country with some of its locally employed workers subject to severe punishment. Ordinary Western visitors to Sudan have been falsely accused with similar charges, punished, tortured, detained without trial and deported. Stories of foreign men being killed in custody and foreign women being raped were not rare. At first, the two suspects were accused of interfering in a disputed inherited property between local citizens of En-Nayed town. An old woman by the name of Sakina Abdulnabi lodged a complaint against her deceased husband's brother and sister. In her lawsuit, she accused the Sharia court of stealing her money and giving it to her in-laws. Through her complaint, Sakina went against the Sharia law and tried to show that the man-made, which had been invented by the West, had more justice and fairness than the divinely revealed law of Allah. Such an accusation was not only a serious blasphemy, but caused Sakina to exit out of the Muslim Ummah, the Islamic community, and became kafira and murtada, an infidel and apostate. In her state of unbelief, Sakina appointed a secular lawyer and decided to fight the decision of the Sharia court in a civil court. The police investigations revealed that she was a very poor widow and hence she wasn't in a good financial position to cover the expenses of a lawyer's fees to fight such a serious and big lawsuit case against the Sharia court from one end and her wealthy brother-in-law on the other end. The police discovered that a foreign couple who were renting 2 huts in Sakina's house were the instigators of such an un-Islamic complaint. The couple had encouraged Sakina to contest the decision of the Sharia court at the civil court, appointed the lawyer for her, paid his fees, and promised to cover any supplementary legal expenses. The daring action of the old woman, in Babakir Hussein Osama's mind, was so blasphemous that is as if a Muslim woman had sued her Allah at a satanic court and wanted the devil to prosecute her God. In accordance, Sakina Abdulnabi was arrested under the serious charges of blasphemy and apostasy and kept in chains until the day she would be brought to the executioners so that her head could be lopped off. The police officer, Babakir Osama, went further, and began to casting serious doubts on the religious affiliation of the foreign couple. The couple claimed to be American Muslims who were running a small private unprofitable charity home for the poor local Muslims. Through the police inquiries there was not even a single local citizen ever received financial help or food from those 2 foreigners. More serious than that, the imam of the local mosque, which was located 1 block away from their residence, and his congregation had never seen the American man visiting their mosque even once. How a man could claim to be a Muslim when he had not come to the mosque for 1 single prayer in 8 months? The Prophet Muhammad said, "If you see a man repeatedly visiting the mosque, then bear witness for his faith." In addition, when the 2 Eritrean employees of the foreign couple were interrogated by the police, they said that they had never seen their employers praying even a single prayer during all the time of their employment. To top it all, their Eritrean cook, Rose Salah, swore under oath by placing her right hand on her Holy Quran that whenever she served food to her American employers, they would close their eyes, bow their heads and bless their food, not much different from the Christians in Eritrea. The last evidence that sealed the fate of the American couple was their laptop. After searching the files in their laptop, the police found detailed descriptions with nasty critical evaluations of obligatory Islamic practices. The nasty critique directed attacks against the honorable women's hijabs and niqabs, right of the man to polygamy, right of the child to get married, wife discipline, women's circumcision, the wife's obedience law, and the Sharia law of inheritance. The American couple even called the noble martyrdom of the soldier of Allah, the son of Sakina Abdulnabi in jihad against the Christian infidels, a foolish death. The martyr Khalid Mahmoud was considered by them to have been brainwashed and deceived by the false promise of the 72 virgins in paradise. The police officer, Babakir Hussein Osama, concluded that the writer of those blasphemous remarks could not be a Muslim at all. A Muslim would cease to be a Muslim if he rejected the Sharia law of Allah and His Messenger and preferred to follow a man-made law that had been invented by the accursed Westerners in their open disbelief in God and even lack of belief in their distorted and corrupted religion of Christianity. Finally, the inclusion of names, dates, and places, and the general accuracy of observations, made the entries look exactly like what a spy amidst them would write down. After finding tangible evidence in their laptop, Babakir Osama was fully convinced that the American man and his Indian wife were Muslims, pretenders who came to spy on Muslim women with the intention of eventual exposure in their country and with the intention of destroying the Muslim Ummah and defaming the beautiful religion of Islam. Accordingly, Babakir wrote a full report including the photos of the two conspirators and lengthy quotations from their nasty critical devaluations of the practices of Muslim women. He then emailed his report to the highest police authority in Khartoum. He decided to keep the matter hidden from the local newspapers and radio. He did not want the case of the two American detainees to reach the ears of the Human Rights Watch or any other foreign organization or embassy before the police authority at Khartoum had laid hands on the two evil spies and conspirators. After writing his report and emailing it to the highest police authority at Khartoum, the righteous police of Allah, Babakir Hussein Osama decided to exact his pound of flesh nearest to the heart on the Indian woman and the American man. It was a golden opportunity, he thus believed, that his Allah had delivered his enemies in his hands and it was time to exact justice regarding all the evils that had been done to him in India and against the never-ending evils that America and its allies were doing in the Muslim world. The most dangerous person in the third world is a policeman. And the most vulnerable person is a lone woman. It is impossible for the woman to step out of her house alone and not fall prey to cops. Every young woman walking in the streets without her father, brother, or husband would be considered a prostitute. Men would tease her verbally, harass her sexually, and follow her as hungry wolves chase a stray sheep. If she dared to talk to them or try to stop them from following her, that action would give them more assurance that she was indeed a bad girl, since good girls are not supposed to speak to men in public. If she kept silent and continued to walk, they would just keep teasing her and following her until she reached her house. But, if she fell in the hands of the policeman, then it is certain that harm and rape are distinct possibilities. In Sudan, the most vulnerable groups were the Eritreans and the refugees. Eritrean girls are raped inside their refugees camps by the very Sudanese soldiers who are assigned to protect them and by the Sudanese employees and workers who supposed to serve them. If a refugee girl dares to step out of camp, she would effectively deliver herself to the Sudanese police. A Sudanese policeman is likely to boast among his colleagues and friends about the number of the Eritrean girls he has slept with. Refugee girls preferring to escape their miserable lives in the camps move to the cities, earning their keep by becoming prostitutes or working as maidservants in Sudanese homes. Refugee girls working as maidservants in local houses were easy targets for all kinds of sexual harassment by their male employers. On the day Sakina Abdulnabi's house was raided by the policeman, she wasn't arrested alone, but every living creature in her house was taken into custody. Even her dog, which dared to bark at the men of the law, was hit with big batons, wounded, rendered unconscious, and taken in custody. Also, Samira, Mona, and Rose were all tied up with long ropes and loaded in a police wagon and carried away. The two Eritrean girls were arrested under the charges of running away from their camp and living within city limits without legal permits. When the 4 foreign suspects were brought to the police custody, they were detained in 2 separate huts. The 3 girls were kept in one hut while Samir was put in a hut with other local detainees. None of the 4 foreigners knew where the old woman was imprisoned. Being a local detainee, Sakina was taken to a huge hut that was crowded with local liquor makers, badly battered wives, illegally impregnated girls, half-dead women, prostitutes, murderers, etc. As soon as they were placed in a hut, the 3 foreign girls were interrogated by the police officer, Babakir Osama. The 2 Eritrean girls admitted that they had run away from their refugee camp without official papers. Samira denied all the allegations that had been made against her and her husband. Likewise, when he was questioned, Samir denied all the accusations, but admitted that he had collected the data about the abuse of women because he was major in religious studies. Both Samir and Samira refused to admit that they weren't Muslims, but pretenders. Nevertheless, the police officer, Babakir Osama refused to accept their statements and held them up under the serious charges of being pretenders who came to spy the Muslim society with the intention of defaming Islam and casting doubts on the prophethood of Muhammad. Samira, being still naive girl, did not take the accusations seriously, but Samir was so frightened by them. He expected that if their case reached higher authority in Khartoum, then the hidden identity of his wife would be revealed. She would be recognized as the former Miss World who called the Prophet Muhammad my foot and threatened to spit on the Holy Quran of Muslims. If her hidden past was exposed, then she would be in more intolerable situation than if the American FBI suddenly discovered that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of the ISIS, was holding up in a small town in the United States of America. Not surprisingly, Samir remained awake at night thinking how to stop his beloved wife and himself from reaching the capital city with those serious charges and evidence and eventually ending up in the gallows. Despite the situation, Samira remained calm in her lock-up hut with the other two Eritrean girls. When the night fell, she left Mona and Rose talking in their mother tongue, and fell asleep. Her sleep was interrupted at midnight when a couple of policemen walked inside their hut. The two policemen did not speak a word either to each other or to the three female detainees. Samira was so frightened when she opened her eyes and found them standing in the middle of the hut. She could not believe her eyes when she saw one of the cops sat near one of the two Eritrean girls and began to touch her body. He began to caress her breasts and then kissed her in her lips. Samira's astonishment peaked when she saw the other cop sit beside the other Eritrean girl and began to hug and kiss her too. Before she could overcome the shock, the cops started undressing the girls. What troubled Samira was that neither girl appeared to refuse or resist the advances. She became angrier with the Eritrean girls than with the policemen. Samira shouted at the girls in English and told them to stop responding to the policemen before they were raped. Her interpreter simply told her that they were girls and strangers in Sudan and could do nothing to prevent or forestall what was going to happen. She also told her that agreeing to sex is the only way to get their freedom back. Samira rebuked her more harshly for her silly excuse of allowing such nonsense to be done to her. Before she could finish berating her interpreter, Samira noticed that her cook was naked, on her back, with the other policeman on top of her. Samira ignored Mona and began to rebuke Rose and asked her to do something to stop that wicked man from raping her. Nonetheless, Rose remained deaf and dumb, continuing as if no one was talking to her. By then, Mona and her partner for the night had also reached the same shameful climax. When she had failed to convince the two Eritrean girls, Samira began to shout at the two cops, but none of them understood a word from what she was saying or bothered to look at her. They fully indulged themselves with the two complacent girls. Samira, aghast, locked in fear, minding herself to neither turn away or close her eyes, lest she be caught unguarded and jumped upon by one of those wicked men. She ignored the two uncaring girls and began to worry about herself. She fully expected that as soon as those two evil men finished with their easy praise they would come after her and rape her too.